I'm back. So anyway, yeah, Das Spook is in the background. I just figured I'd keep some relationship to the fact that I started doing this because he started doing it, and but also this was on my mind during this painting thing. But regardless, yeah, I'd like to keep it related to his conversation, but it's sort of impossible. His conversation is all crazy. I mean, it's all spiritual all the time. There's really no other channel so far, and I don't think even if there was another channel, we'd find much to talk about in terms of any kind of fundamental agreement anyway. He seems quite susceptible to any kind of truther, kooker theories of existence and function, and yeah, who's got patience for that? I mean, who certainly, it does nothing for me in terms of inspiration, I suppose, in terms of making a commentary or saying anything through a painting. But anyway, so the subject word, I figure I'd just do words and let the words evolve into a conversation of some kind. So yeah, I did a very cheap drawing that I liked very much. You know, I guess I could show it better. It's really not a bad sketch. It wasn't what I was thinking of, though. I mean, you know, it happens when the shape of the canvas sort of told me something else. You know, I have a frame for this to fit in, so that's why I chose it. And it's old, that's why it has drip marks on, all kinds of mess. It's just a piece of wallboard. But anyway, so the drawing sort of, the shape sort of dictated what I ended up with. And what I wanted to do was take the image and have the two sides of the image, you know, representing sort of a, you know, this side being the passionate, this side being the rational, maybe this side being, you know, drawing and pulling, you know, a force of attraction versus a repulsion, you know, these dualities, and try to get them somehow into the background. But now I have so little background to work with that that's going to be a little tricky. So I don't know if that's going to work out. So I think I'll just paint it and we'll see where it goes. And yeah, but yeah, I was thinking I do want to do something stylistically different. So I'm still at that point where I wanted to probably say something more than my usual work. I guess I'll use a bigger brush because I'll just get some broad color on here. Perhaps, I didn't think of that. That it is the beginning. So, yeah, I think that's enough preliminary work, right? I still use just the same, I just use a simple palette, you know, red, blue, black. I don't see any blue on here actually. You know, red, yellow, and you know, white, to make colors that look like something like what I'm after. And then, you know, I refine that as I go. But yeah, I'm not too specific on worrying too much about colors. And this will probably do for a foundation. So anyway, you know, I've stated this before, but I mean the game we're playing is the evolution game. There's not some other game we're occupied in, and it's the context of our existence. It's the thing that just defeats all of this spiritualism crap. Is the fact of evolution. You can't account for spiritualism in, you know, 3-4 billion years of evolution. It just doesn't provide any room for that kind of, you know, mumbo jumbo of higher planes and higher purposes, and you know, that just becomes, you know, a kind of, you know, baby talk. It doesn't have anything to do with the reality of our structure and our function. So you know, even people like Conference Report have become, I mean, it's ironic how things have evolved in some of this YouTube conversation, that Professor Anton is now the voice of reason, on the subject of consciousness, and its conference report, who's, gone on trips of woo, trips of let's pretend our consciousness is something we can't just recognize it as a function, and that it'll always have a name. It'll always be a way to identify the function, just as you would identify a train. The fact that we have a brain, and that the brain produces this illusion, and that's what it is. It's an illusion of an internal substance. The consciousness exists inside of you. It's not out here. It's not out there. It's a function of the calculator that you are. It's a type of machine, and the machine produces it internally. And it's not something that exists as an external. It only exists as an internal. It's only what your brain manufactures out of the environment. So in many ways, it's not dissimilar to the very illusion of our senses. And we think of our senses as being harder than our consciousness, but they are the definition of our consciousness. They are the foundation of the consciousness. It's this very capacity to process, to reflexively react. And one of those now, the new reaction, just like your brain is getting an image in the eyeball, reversing the image, and placing it in the context of an understanding of depth perception and gravity. Your brain does this through your maturation, and creates your balance, creates your sense of the world. I have to be a little careful here. I sometimes get into trouble with neck and shoulder lines. Necks get too short or too long. And I'm not going from a reference image, which is always quite dangerous. Because it's hard to remember exactly how. I don't paint enough to. Oh yeah, you just stopped talking. I don't paint enough. I haven't done enough work to be proficient in terms of knowing accurately. To have it like glued into my memory, proportions, and so sometimes I just don't have any thinking that tells me the answer. Some previous knowledge that says, oh yeah, I remember that the muscle goes this way and then it curves in a little bit over here, and I have very little of that memory, that reflex from experience. I mean, I have a lot more when it comes to like painting a lion or a tiger, as I painted, or an eagle even. I mean, the animals I painted a lot of, or a few of anyway, a dozen of, let's say. Once you do it a dozen times, you start to learn the mechanics, and it's just like the second nature seems a weird concept to say, but it becomes a reflex. Your brain reflexively recognizes, okay, this is going to go round, so I go a little darker on this side, and then I put a little shadow on this side, and I got to put a little bit of the blue color in there because the blue is the opposite of the yellow. That kind of logic that you would be applying as you're painting something. And then there's the same thing in terms of acquiring depth in a painting has the same kind of rules. There's these little tricks that you learn about subtleties, subtle little bits of proportion are revealed just in sizing, a subtle degrade in color. As things get further away, the contrast, the range of contrast reduces. So everything just kind of part of what creates depth perception is your brain recognizes the graying and the blurring of the world as it gets further away. And so that's one of the tricks of creating the illusion of depth is just to do it through, you can do it through many mechanisms, and one of the mechanisms is you know, the brightness, lightness, the depth of contrast. You know, these are all just little tricks you can apply to end up with the illusion of depth, just like the trick of size. You know, people will recognize something as having a recognizable size, and I've really got a little too gray here, so I'm going to start applying darker colors, you know, in the shadow lines maybe.
Like a sober mind changing in such a radical way, it would be like dropping acid or smoking weed, and yet you change and maneuver through. I want to call it
yeah, so back to the word evolution, and the idea, just the idea of our evolution, the idea of what it took to get here, what we're made out of, you know, what our fundamental nature of our construction, fundamental purpose of our construction, even you could say, you know, purpose in the context of a surviving machine, a machine that is designed for the function of surviving an environment, and that this is our history, and we're a device, you know, made to survive a competitive battle, to live in a world where it must fight to survive, and you know, that there's no what's the word? You know, you can't separate us from that mechanism in terms of the construction. The construction's a byproduct. The mechanism is a byproduct of that world, and you know, of the mechanism of a machine that has no other viability, you know, except as something that's intended to you know, be you know, be capable of smiting you know, everything else and surviving a harsh, dangerous world. And you know, we can see that. You know, you can look inside yourself and see some of these mechanisms that seem quite mean, calculating, not as generous or beautiful. So you can see parts of yourself that are not very attractive. You know, you're not necessarily very proud of that part of who you are, that element of your personality, you know, that part of your identity. You know, the fact that you're calculating, you know, as you sit and listen to somebody, you know, that you have this internal dialogue. You can see the very aggressive machine, the competitive machine operating inside of you, you know, and that you're not some sort of spiritual entity, that you're an animal calculating advantage, calculating its way of fighting through the world, you know, and succeeding by the standard definition of success. And you know, it's not really a mystery. It's not hidden from our capacity to see it if we want to see it, if we're willing to take the hard look at ourselves. These are, you know, you can see the nature of the beast, the nature of the mechanism. I'm not saying you're probably not going to see the microbe. You're probably not going to see the oldest of your genetic code, but you're going to see some pretty old code in your perceptions and reflexes, you know, in those emotional patterns, you know, not to use the overused metaphor, but the Planet of the Apes metaphor. You can see the ape in you. The gorilla, the orangutan, the chimpanzee. We have these personalities, we have these identities. They're always lingering and competing. These competing interests created by the biology, and again, there's no real room for a spiritual interpretation. It screams consistency with what we know to be the biological origins of where we came from, and we've sort of been outed. Science just doesn't give you room to aggrandize the mission anymore. Making up these stories about the adventure you're on is just not fair to the facts, and it's such an important to get right in terms of understanding. You can't, obviously you can't, we're sitting here saying what's the operating instructions for this mechanism that we are, and you certainly can't understand those. We have to dissect those ourselves. The thing didn't come with a package of statements about what this machine does, what this device is capable of. We have to recognize its capabilities. We have to understand its vulnerabilities, that it's vulnerable to this primitive programming, and that if you're not careful, you're not very deliberate in how we play the game, very explicit in recognizing what we are, that we're probably going to get it wrong, that we're going to end up living delusional, inaccurate worlds we'll be living in. We won't do justice to reality or to the facts of our circumstance as machines, as biological machines, vulnerable to not smart depths of selfishness and not, just really quite illogical notions of victory at the expense of our equals, our worse, our betters. There's more than a few people who have no apprehension of winning, regardless of how. Just the fact of it, that's all that matters. They'll just wear the medal whether they earn the medal or not. Whether it was somebody else who jumped on the grenade, they'll take credit and pretend it was through their ambition or their action that something good happened. I'm just trying to decide if I want to put this arm in the picture or not. I think I have to, so I believe I will. So where was I? Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, we have to, there's this evasion of the reality, the evasion of the true context as biological machines programmed by a very old game, and it is a programming imposed by a game, by a kind of matrix almost. There's a programmer of circumstances. Meteor hits. It gave our ancestors an advantage. It created the opportunity for a certain kind of a change, in the mechanism of what the dominant life form was doing, how the dominant life forms would be spending their day. The function was altered in some subtle ways. That it was not a complete change in function, but a subtle change, but a significant change in how the game was played because now it's a game played by these more emotional, more group, more social, really dominated organisms. And certainly these organisms too that had to live in a hierarchy, where there was such a thing as winners and losers, and you have to play the game within that framework. You can pretend that I am above it or I don't care, but you're not going to live. You're going to have a difficult time getting by in life with that attitude, thinking you're above it, or that it can't touch you, or that it can't hurt you, is not going to be a realistic way through the game. I'm going to get a little green. I couldn't find blue, so I just used green, which I don't know if it's a good idea. No, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. But again, it is the most important concept is evolution, and its drive. It's the consequential, the biggest consequence of that evolution could be labeled as our complex emotional psychology. The fact that we're playing a team game, but not like a mechanical ants, where there is a harsh mechanical hierarchy that is unadjustable. I mean, as an ant, if you're born if you're injected with certain chemistry as your egg maturates, you will be with a soldier ant. You'll be, especially in termites, this is true too. You have a whole order of function, and even the shape of your body and what you'll become is completely dictated by that chemistry. So you get a shot of a bit of chemistry, and based on that chemistry will decide how you're going to live, and probably more importantly, how you're going to die. Your death will be defined by the mission statement, the job that you're obligated to perform. You'll be obligated to perform a mission, to die for the colony in some overt, aggressive manner. And you'll do it because the mechanism makes you want to. Not that you're going to have not as an ant, you're not going to know what death is. You're not going to really understand what you're certainly not going to understand the idea that you're being controlled by a piece of chemistry and being obligated to perform a task for this vacuous kind of reason. Not some kind of good reason, but just because of a chemical circumstance, you're going to be the victim, and you're going to pay the highest price for the sustaining of the colony. But so for us, the important thing is that we have to do that all as individuals. We have to understand the concept of the order enforced on an ant colony. An ant colony has the rationality of that sacrifice and the sensibility of it hardwired, without thought, without deliberation, without any independent requirement of judgment. It's like the Planet of the Apes again, in the sense that the gorillas are born gorillas, the orangutans are born orangutans, and the chimpanzees are born chimpanzees. And that birth draws the individuals to a certain destiny. Now, certainly one would argue that as the Planet of the Apes evolved, as the ape city evolved, one would expect that gorillas would be allowed to eventually cross-dress and, you know, be girls, and they could do all kinds, you know, the expression of deviance, the right to be deviant would be respected, because the general population would recognize that there was no necessity to be, you know, defined or confined by those biological restraints, that it was possible for a gorilla not to be an imbecile, and it was possible for an orangutan to be, you know, aggressively competitive and like fighting. You know, that these would be possible manifestations, and that in the benefit of the overall colony, it would be a good idea, the overall society, it would be in the best interest of the overall society to acknowledge the fact that this variance exists, and that you can still maximize function and get even more function by having people suited not by biology, but by the higher emotional programming, to let that sort of loose and let that sort of define in a more elaborate way what people would be. And okay, but that's like it's a little bit of a side issue I don't want to get lost in. Yeah, I haven't really decided what I want exactly for her yet, so I'll just put in a kind of a dark, and then we'll put highlights on it later, I think. That's what I think I'll start with. And there will be an overlap on this side over the face of the hair, but I don't know if I have to put that in yet. So anyway, where was I? Water. Oh man, my back is still shit. So, where was I? So evolution and yeah, the mechanical functions. So the psychology will become more revealed if we look for it. And once we know we have it, we can recognize when we're being gamed, you know, by the molecule, controlled by the agenda of the molecule, instead of by this higher faculty capacity to describe reality with an intellectual brain, a brain that has been provided as a mechanism for modeling a world very different than the one we're going to model with it. We're able to model the universe, you know, as if we could navigate the universe, and we can't. But that's the function of the capacity that we have, is that its usefulness evolutionarily was in its ability to, you know, understand that trees don't jump in front of your way when you're running, or to understand, to recognize and gain knowledge of why certain animals, what certain animals' habits are, to know that you know, the lions go get their water at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's you don't want to go to the watering hole at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because you've learned that that's when lions you know, like to do their drinking. And so you can learn how your environment functions, so you can presumably you know, be clever enough to avoid getting consumed by the environment, destroyed by the environment. And that's the basic function, that's the basic causes, reasons, mechanisms of having a brain that you know, does the functionality we have. And that's, you know, I've made extensive videos on the subject of why we have emotions, and the fact that the emotions create this value mechanism where we're able to compare two things, two choices, and put them on a scale internally in our brain and measure them based on an emotional feeling, a feeling that will tell us will balance the two equations. So instead of doing pure logic and saying and being able to say, you know, this choice has a 30% probability, this one has a 70% probability, this one will produce, you know, 4 points worth of, you know, a 4% chance of complete annihilation. This one will produce a, you know, 10% chance of complete annihilation. You know, instead of having to do all this calculus, we basically have a emotional reaction that our brain produces. And certainly if we have enough time to think, we can do the more elaborate thinking and create in ourselves. You know, I think you've probably experienced that, where you think about something, and by thinking, you scare yourself. You recognize things that are worth being afraid of in the circumstance, and that is when you say, oh shit, I really don't want to do that because that's dangerous. And you realize the danger by thinking. And then once you realize the danger, you're almost frightened by the fact that you almost did something incredibly stupid. But it's fear that's generated. It generates in you this understanding of risk and danger, and that provides you with the mechanism, the ability to react. Even though the logic was what did it, I mean, your logic created the fear. It's the fear that made you act differently. So we're still emotionally driven, and what our reason is being used to facilitate emotions that are motivating, because it's allowing us to see the dark side, to see past the obvious, and to see dangers that lurk deeper inside of things. You know, that might, you know, that it would be worth avoiding stepping into. You know, being stupid. You can avoid being stupid, but you'll do it through a stupid emotion. So that's the irony, is that a stupid emotion, a crude emotion, will be actualized through intelligent visualization, intelligent modeling, intelligent thinking about what you've subjected yourself to. And I'm just not too sure about this. I will have to go to a reference for this arm thing, because I'm not too confident of the break somewhere in there. Too much dark. Fix that later. So there's no escaping the mechanism, the function. You can go. You can see it in yourself. That's it. That's, I think, I just think no honest person would deny that they can see the crude beast inside their brain, the selfish beast, the I'm not going to say monster, but I mean, there is something kind of monstrous in how much of a conniving brain we do have. At least I see it in my own behavior. Oh, there's old fan.
You sound a little phlegmy, a little caught up there in the throat, but not too shabby. God,
If they say anything.
I got off to a slow start. I was going to go out and play last night, but I think I'm reserving it to today. I wanted to put in a hard day's work, and I'm doing it.
Good.
And I'm creating more of my hellbound bite structure here. I'm just waiting to see inmendham's video where he's doing a painting of my painting as he said he was going to do.
Oh, I already posted that video. So you're way behind. Yeah, way behind.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's looking really good so far. It's really, I mean, I guess I haven't seen like a tremendous number of your paintings, but it seems very different, and the way it's constructed seems pretty different.
Yeah,
I mean,
I haven't
different.
compartmentalized paintings quite this way in the past, so this one feels very compartmentalized, like image here, image there, image here, image there, and I'm even putting them in boxes in cases, little encased boxes with elements in it, like I'm collecting items.
So, anyway, I was just listening a little bit just to see if there was something, but they're just saying hello for now. Just getting to find their relevancy, I suppose. Yeah, I'm very, I think it's great that Das Book is doing that. It's just me personally. I'm just not, I just don't, I can't see any functionality in, we've sort of talked about it, and there's just not much else to say. I don't get him. I mean, I don't get the conversation, that revolves around this notion that we're something other than biological mechanisms. I mean, it's just so obvious, so complete in its explanation of everything we do, everything about us is perfectly and satisfactorily described through a recognition of evolution. It just doesn't need any further. There's no other room. There's no void or room really for some other context or story to tell. The story is survival machines in the context of a process that demands that the machines fight for their existence, and that seems quite clearly what we're involved in. We're involved in a desperately difficult struggle for winning a game that just, it's just really about, creating the emotional and biological imperative, mostly reduced to what you could call an emotion. I mean, you could argue that even the sense of hunger, the feeling of hunger, you could argue is a kind of emotion. I think that's why it's metaphored. Like other desires, like sex or something else, would be metaphored to this hunger, and because that's pretty much it is a quite suitable description of the underlying character of what the feeling does to us, what it creates in terms of our feelings and in terms of the overall character of our experience is completely controlled by that mechanism, completely, it just leaves nothing else, it doesn't leave anything else but the idea of I need, I want, I. It is an internal function. That's always a common argument too, is the fact that this selfish idea, and what part of us does anything of higher ambition, and is it, do we do anything of a higher ambition on purpose, or we do it merely because it's related to some sort of winning of the game? We can't be winners if we're found out to be takers. If you're perceived to be selfish or unsympathetic and uncompassionate and all these things, this in many social circumstances might be a cause for you of some discomfort and grief, because you won't be socially accepted or liked or are appreciated in any kind of real way, because yeah, you'll be perceived as this thing, this monster that takes, and obviously none of us wants to be perceived in that kind of negative way as a taker. And so again, we're back to the emotional nature of the mechanism. It's always the dominant force. Yeah, that just went all wrong. I mean, that was just one of those things where you just say, wow, that couldn't have gone any wronger. Yeah, that wasn't at all what I was looking for. How did I hit the wrong button there? Jeez, I had something pretty good and kind of just pounded the crap out of it until dead. Yeah, that was pretty funny. Well, that, you know, painting is, you make it, you break it, you make it, you break it, you make it, you break it. That's the name of the game. You're just constantly saying, not quite, not quite. Keep playing with it until you get it right. And at least that's my version of painting. Is that you can never escape the search for the perfection, and it will take some work to get to merely, barely satisfactory. You know, where somewhere you might get to a point where you'll say, okay, that's, I can, it's barely tolerable. I think we're going to do green eyes for now.
I sure hope that this video is actually working.
Yeah, I don't think it mattered whether that one worked, Daspook, because you know you didn't say anything new. Same old crap. Spiritual, blah 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 blah. And yeah, I mean, really, you just want to preach about the mumbo jumbo, you know. It's just, you know, I mean, I don't, you know, you are talking to people who, generally speaking, are atheists, and, you know, how much do they really want to hear about some pseudo-ish half-god you've created? You know, this notion of where you've done even worse than the people like Professor Anton are kind of annoying because they make up a fairy god, a god that doesn't have a hell and isn't a jerk. And you know, Daspook's god is the asshole god. We're back to the asshole god where somehow he's going to worry about whether you smoke cigarettes or you know, you do some other silly little thing, and we'll call that a sin. That seems like a total waste of you know, reason space. What would be the reason for a god to give a shit about that kind of bullshit? When you're using the word like spiritual, like your spirit should be about something a lot more interesting than whether you smoke cigarettes. I mean, a lot more interesting. Boy, those are the worst eyes I think I've ever done. Not even round. Well, I'm just trying to get them in for now, actually, so it doesn't really matter.
I don't mind hearing anybody's input on it. Carla's been okay commenting. And the weird thing is that sometimes it'll say I have 5 comments, and then none will show up, and then I'll wait a day later, and I'll check my comments, and 3 comments.
Yeah, I've had the same problem with the comments. They're not showing up very timely.
It said 3 comments, and I checked it, and I had 1 comment. So I had to go back into my comments list and see old comments, and it's not as if the comments were...
Yeah, they do have a new comment list, which is nice, but, you know, like every time they change something, it just doesn't work very well. So at the moment, you know, comments are not very useful. At least my experiences, I've not found them very useful. So what I might do with these paintings too is, you know, just because I don't, you know, I don't know if it's really practical to make a video for each each adjustment. So I might make some adjustments that are more delicate, you know, without making a video, and then go back to it when I, you know, I'm doing something. I don't need to be as precise in what I'm doing or careful, or you know, I can afford to, you know, I don't have to worry about my hand moving, you know, these kind of things. I can be a little more careful, and maybe even use better lighting, you know, all that kind of crap. So I might do that just to make it, you know, more, just so I can end up doing a better painting in the end. I think that might be necessary. Yeah, it will be necessary. But we'll see how it goes. See how I progress in this activity. Oops, let me fuck that up. Yeah, they're not exactly even, but they're not exactly horrible either. So we can probably live with that for now. So yeah, I'm sort of running out. So anyway, bottom line, evolution is the beginning. And I guess the next word I'll focus on is maybe psychology. Psychology is the next, you know, it is the thing the evolution has created. And I did a bit of discussing about that in this video, but I mean, it really is, for us, for conscious organisms, it's the nature, it's the fundament of our consciousness is psychology. It's the it's what you could sit there and, if you want to give it a word, you know, the thing that creates the substance of what we feel, what we experience. It's going to be put in that category of a conscious experience that is the, you know, the driving, controlling, you know, the most relevant element of the machine is this, you know, the most relevant element of, sorry, see, it's that kind of thing too. It's just, you know, I've got to reach over the canvas in some way. I should switch, maybe I should paint with my left hand. Do certain things. So we need a little bit of squiggly crap in there. Squiggly, squiggly, squiggly. More depth in here. And then we need more light outside of there. So do a little bit of this. Mix it with this yuck color. See if we can find a color here. Just to blend this out a little bit. As I have to decide how deep to make the dark, how deep to make the eyes. I have to decide on that. Deep. That's how you make somebody younger or older, I guess, in some respects, is what you do with eyes. Kind of important. Probably. A little bit of light over here. And such. I don't really have this face headline quite right. I'll fix that. And a lot of things to fix. I'm going to have to still decide on how close I want, how far in I want that hair to cut. But I'll worry about that later. Could do a little work on the nipples. That's an ugly color. With that. Whatever the hell that was, we won't bother with that. In other words, oh yeah, summing up. Yeah. I'm just thinking of the, I watched the movie and I wanted to get to that. It was the movie the effects. Maybe it's a good movie for a conversation about psychology, so maybe I will save that for next time. I'll just mention the movie. The effect of gamma radiation on Man in the Moon Marigold. I haven't seen it in years. It's just such a, you know, poignant, sad, you know, not like sad, like horrible sad, but just points out some of the tragedy of life, and it does try in the end to, you know, create some sort of counter statement to the tragedy, you know, where they try to say in the end of a movie, you know, that oh, it's not all that bad, you know, that there's some redemption in the character, some redemption in the story, and you know, there really isn't, you know, it's just all stoic, it's just all, you know, it's just a story of fighting through the choking, the suffocating horror, and you know, it really is a great movie for just doing that alone. I mean, the way it did it